Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to share this time with you. What I want to do tonight is spend a little bit of time, to exactly going a little bit of time going through our process that we used to get to where we made a decision, and then talk to you about how we arrived at that decision and what we believe it should look like. And then I will have the opportunity to take questions from you. I ask that if you have questions, if you could put them in the chat windows, and then at the end, Miranda will pull up questions, and she's going to see if there's themes that come through, and if those themes come through, those questions will be asked first, and then we'll have the one-off questions. But this evening, just want to talk to you about how we arrived at our recommendation, and then talk about what our plan for wellness and partnership looks like, and then what we believe teaching and learning should look like, and then what our next steps are as a district. So any questions you have, just drop them in the chat window. So what drives us first and foremost are our core values. We're student-centered. Students come first. We are fearless in this work. We know that we have to be united, have to work as a team. If students need more, they will receive more, which is social justice. And then we are diversity driven. And you'll notice that if you notice the first five letters of the first letter of each of those 5 words, it spells out SFUSD, because that's who we are. Our mission is that every day we're going to provide each and every student quality instruction and equitable support so that they can thrive in the 21st century. This, as a district, is our marching orders. So in the late spring and throughout the summer, what we did was we spent time, we developed working groups to determine what the recommendation would be to the board for fall learning. These work groups had a wide range of people on them: teachers, administrators, parents, students, community members, all on these groups to make recommendations to the board. There was a logistics work group, a teaching and learning work group, and a personnel work group. And they came up with a number of protocols and determined that health and safety was number 1 in terms of returning to learning. And you can see some of the protocols that would need to be put in place in order for us to return. And so the determination was made from these groups, made a recommendation that we would return in the fall with distance learning. And with that in mind, then we knew we had to have a care plan for wellness for our students upon if we were launching in distance learning. And so you can see here that these are some of the guiding principles around that wellness plan: health, anti-racist healing practices. So we know we have to absolutely support families through what we're going through right now, both with the pandemic, and one of the things we didn't anticipate was that the skies would be brown every day through the fall. So it's how do we get through this together, and how do we make sure that we have an authentic relationship with you that is two-way and has mutual respect and trust. And so that's what we've been worked on through the summer, and started launching in the fall. We developed a family resource link, and so that's on our website if you haven't seen it. And this is supports for families. And then we have coordinated wellness check-ins. We knew this was important for our families to make sure that they were getting all that they deserved. And then as we move forward with teaching and learning, the same thing, we went through this process. We also had town halls where we heard from students. You can see here 16,000 responses, 23,000 thoughts were shared, 376 thoughts were rated. And through those town halls, this is what we heard from students. And if you look at all of these comments, it really is around connection. Our students constantly talked about being connected and the importance of connection. And so this is where we developed what we knew we had to do. If we were going to be in distance learning, then we had to have connection, making sure our students were connected with each other and with their instructors and with their schools. We needed to make sure we were communicating effectively, and we wanted to make sure that there was consistency through our process. The priorities for distance learning, when you see here, you just saw consistency, was to make sure we had consistent structures, not only for instruction, but for support for families. Our practices had to be anti-racist, making sure that we had all beliefs and all aspects were going to be represented as we moved forward with positive approaches. These approaches had to be aligned to the graduate profile. And then we knew wellness had to be a big part of these partnerships that we were going to have with our families, because if we weren't connecting with you, then we know our students weren't going to learn all that they possibly can. Through this time also, the Senate, the California Senate was acting, and one of the things they put forward was that in the spring, there wasn't as much live interaction between teachers and, which is a part of connection. So part of the Senate bill that they developed actually needed to have that in. So they said interaction, instruction, and check-ins had to be a part of in every district. We were already moving towards this, so it worked perfectly. And then they actually put a floor for the number of minutes that students had to have live instruction daily. So we knew we had to distribute tools for our students, both digital tools and non-digital. So you can see this is the process we went through. Every site went through a process to make sure they had a plan. They prepared distribution packets. They connected with families. I actually am a site captain at one of the sites where we have remote learning occurring, and students are still coming in, picking up hotspots, picking up technology. So we know that this plan is working and in effect. This just gives you a sense of what the digital resources were and the non-digital resources. And we knew through both of these processes, we had to have connection at the forefront along with consistency. So how do we consistently make sure that our parents are connected with where we are trying to make sure our students are headed? We determined that in those first 30 days, there had to be wellness, checking in with students, checking in with families after a long, hard summer to make sure that they're well. If students aren't well, we know that they are not going to be able to learn. And you can see here that there had to be consistent two-way communication, as well as us really focused on making sure we're checking in with you. We wanted to make sure that we had prepared our teachers and instructors for high quality learning. And then after we're checking in and making sure everybody's prepared, then we started launching our instruction. And I was happy to see the results of the poll where most people either felt that it was much better than expected, or many said it is at least tolerable. We know that our most effective instruction comes from face-to-face. So we are doing everything we can, and knowing that we can't be face-to-face now, to enhance distance learning. We talked about and are looking at supports for students with special populations. This includes our students with IEPs, our English learners, our foster students in foster homes, and our homeless students, and students who were minimally engaged, or students that we minimally engage, students that we struggle to engage. Those are the students that we know that we want to, when we come back, we want to attempt to bring back first. So these are just some of the supports. There is a distance learning guide on our website. If you haven't gone to our website, definitely go check that out, because it tells you what you can expect from distance learning. This is the PD that we've done with our educators to make sure they're well prepared. This is the support resources this is all on our website. And one of the things that I encourage families, even when I'm talking to families who aren't in our district, go to your district's website, because the resources have been beefed up in such a way to support you while you are assisting us in teaching at home. Strategies for supporting students. This is all, once again, on our website. You see family resources, tech resources, resource links, and we also have a helpline that you can call in to get assistance. So all this is set up to make sure that we're connected with you, and we have consistent ways to connect with you and to give you the assistance you need. Finally, I just wanted to take a few seconds to go over the next steps. So as we said, we started in distance learning. Now we're moving to phase 2, and phase 2 is how we're going to bring small groups back And this gives you a sense of all the things we're considering in bringing small groups back. We have to identify students. We have to have the safety measures in place. We have to train our staff and our families. We have to have COVID-19 prevention measures in place. Our school facilities have to be prepped. And then we have to have learning plans in place. And then we have to have agreement with our labor partners in order to bring students back. This is what we're working on right now. So I receive some emails from some families to say, what's going on? Are you moving forward? How are you moving forward? These are all the things we're working on. And we're actually going to put a dashboard up in the coming weeks. So you'll be able to follow our progress as we're moving towards bringing students back. But once again, I want to remind you, for us, safety is foremost. Safety and data is what is at the top of bringing students back. And this is bringing back a larger group. And you can see it's very similar to bringing back the first small group. So the first small group would probably be somewhere between 500 to 1,000 students. This would be somewhere between 2,500 to 10,000 students. And with that, I just talked about our next steps, continuing to work with our labor partners. Our facilities departments are working in assessing schools and addressing the needs to bring back students. And we are working hard to make that happen. And as I said, in a few weeks, you should see a dashboard on our website where you can follow our progress in terms of getting ready to bring students back, some students back, small groups of students. And with that, I promised I would be 10 minutes. I went 11. So I wanted to stop there. And then this gives you the opportunity to ask me any questions that you have.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. I'm looking through the questions, and there aren't a whole lot of questions. Here's one that came in. So you're saying that children with IEPs need special supports. However, there's no plan for return to school for kids with IEPs unless they're in a moderate to severe special day class. What about the rest of the children with IEPs, especially those who are not able to learn or connect over distance learning?
Great question. So our first, as you just saw, our first slide was, one of the first slides you saw in terms of bringing students back was mod severe, absolutely correct. But the next group that we are targeting or want to bring back would be students with IEPs who aren't mod severe. So we are making progress as quickly as we can, but we want to do it as safe a manner as we can. And each of the groups, the more students that you return, the more students who we have to make sure we have safety measures in place. So that is, and we know, as I said, you saw the groups that we know that we are less able to engage, which is why we are looking at those students to bring back, if parents also agree that these are the students that they agree that they want their students to return. That's the other part of this. We would make offers to parents, but parents ultimately have to determine whether they would want their students to return or not.
Thank you. And I'm also seeing there's a question, earlier in your presentation, you talked about authentic relationship or authentic partnership. How do you define authentic relationship in our school district?
So for us, it's not doing for someone or doing to someone, it's doing with someone. That's what we consider authentic partnership. Actually, all of our administrators during our summer return, it's all of the site administrators. There are 120 principals, and then anywhere from 120 to 200 assistant principals, and then some district site personnel or central personnel. All of them, which is about 450 people, went through training this summer around authentic partnership, and they're actually beginning to work on authentic. They were to identify 2 or 3 authentic people they wanted to build that authentic partnership bridge with, and then begin to move forward. We see it as two-way. That's why we're calling it the authentic partnership bridge. And the most important aspect of it is as you're thinking about this partnership, you're thinking about whatever progress we're going to make, it needs to be made together. It's a big part of why we had our work groups during the summer. We knew that the work we needed to do could not be done to parents. It could not be done to families. It had to be done with families, which is why we insisted that these work groups had to have representatives from families. We had to have representatives from our student populations on these work groups because we needed to do this work together.
Thank you. I know we appreciated being part of one of those groups. I'm seeing a few more questions coming in. One of them is about facilities. So some schools have facility problems that predate COVID. How's the district prioritizing facility issues in general and facility issues that are directly related to COVID, like HVAC?
So one of the, there's not a lot of positives that come from a pandemic. For us, I will say as a superintendent, one of my pet peeves has been that we've known that there is we've known forever that there's been this digital divide, but we as a system, not just San Francisco Unified, but a system throughout this nation of schools hadn't, what I say is we've had the skill, we know what the skill was to tackle the digital divide, but we didn't have the will to do it. We did not put devices in students' hands. And this pandemic has said, you have to do this, and we have. So I'm glad, I'm gonna tell you, one of my goals is those computers will remain where they are after this pandemic is over. Students who need them should have them. Another one is wellness checks. This is something that we've known as a district we've needed to do, but so that skill has been there, but not the will to do it. So that's another positive from the pandemic. Another one is that with the schools not being occupied at this time, facilities has been able to knock their list of, for example, HVAC issues, broken windows, plumbing that hasn't been working, been able to knock that down to zero. So they have completely caught up on all of the facility issues. Because what typically happens is there's a facilities issue, you're trying to get to that, but as you're trying to get to that, two more would break out over at this other school. So the one that was over here, it just falls further and further behind. You want to get to it, but then three more break out. Well, with the schools not being open, it has allowed the facilities department, buildings and grounds to get around to every school and knock out all of the work orders that were immediate, as well as the overdue work orders, the work orders that had been in the system for a year, 2 years, to knock that list down to zero. So issues that existed, at least previously, have now been completely wiped out, which is, so that's another positive in a land of a lot of not positives.
Appreciate hearing about that. There are a few, I'm sure you're not surprised, a few questions about the timeline for returning to school. One specific question is about why second grade was removed from the first group of students, but then there's also questions about sort of if we know a timeline to bring all students back to in-person learning. And then there's one related question about, is there any hint about what the dashboard for return will convey? So like what student populations and what timeline? I think these are all kind of related. Everyone wants to know, like, when do we think that everyone might be back?
Yeah, so good question. So part of what's in the dashboard goes to the decision tree, the items that are there. And then if you double click down, there's more items that relate to. So at the top level, we just want to communicate, this is the high level of what we need to do. What's attached to that is the timeline. And we can't develop that timeline until we begin to get a sense of how long it's going to take us to do these things. So the question about, so that's one thing. We don't have that timeline yet, but as we see this first group, we're learning more and more as we have the opportunities to, like, for example, so I talked to you, like, I'm a site captain at one of our remote sites. The remote sites are where teachers have told us that they're in distance learning, but they can't do it from their apartment or from their home for various reasons. So they need to do it from a site. So at those sites, there's 15, 20 teachers who are there teaching from sites, and we're learning from them. They have to come in, they have to do a health check every day. So we're learning how to do that. They had to go through modules before they could come back. So these modules are developed. So these are the modules that we can then begin to share with families. So all of this is giving us more insight. As we are going through our decision tree, that's going to give us more insight into how long this is going to take to bring back. And the insight that it'll give parents is it will allow you to see, as we're moving forward, you will begin to see the progress. Because that's the question that you're asking is, so for example, the group you want to keep an eye on is that first small group. And the first dashboard will be around that first small group and bringing those students back. The group that I said 500 to 1,000. If we have that up in 2 weeks, you'll be able to see what areas are still red. If it's we're still determining the color coding, but if it's like red, orange, yellow, green, so some things are already green. Like the city determination for small groups is already all green. So that's all green. We know identifying the students is probably at an orange right now. So then what will take it to a green is families determining whether they're going to come back or not. So you'll be able to see what it will convey to the community is the progress that the district is making towards bringing that first small group back.
And when do we think that we'll see the dashboard?
So I'm gonna announce that at the board meeting. So I don't want to get ahead of the board.
All right, I understand.
At Tuesday night, I will announce when we anticipate that the dashboard will be up for all parents to see. I'll tell you that it will be before the end of this month for sure. Long before.
Great. I am not sure that there's any other questions. That's hard for me to believe, but I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. If there's anyone who wants to get a last minute question in, we still have a couple of minutes left, about 3 minutes left.
And I just want to highlight that I did 10 minutes, so you were doubtful.
Yeah, you got through those slides very quickly. I really appreciate all that you covered.
Why we're saying, yeah, we're looking.
Tengo una pregunta.
Yeah, so it's.
Mi nombre es Luz Rodríguez y la pregunta es.
Is there a question?
I think you can go ahead.
So I saw a question in the chat about why were second graders removed. The district is still we are still trying to determine so in order to bring students back, we're trying to determine how large a group and what we can do effectively. And I think once we see this first group come back, we'll determine then if we can effectively bring back K through 2 at a larger scale or not. So we really wanted to target a small group and see how effective we are at bringing them back. And the whole thing, as I said, the number one priority for the district is safety. And it really is around making sure that we're keeping our students safe. And then at the same time, we want to make sure that the instructional staff is safe also. One of the things that is key is that teachers are not going to be able to teach if they are worried about their safety. We heard a number of teachers who actually called in at the previous board meeting when the decision tree was unveiled, and they shared stories of colleagues that they know in other places who are going in now, Georgia, other states, and are terrified every day. They feel like they don't have a choice because they want to keep their jobs. And at the same time, they're terrified in going in. And so we just want to make sure that we're keeping not only, we want to make sure everybody is safe. Like, for example, in the remote work sites, I am one of the groups that is at risk is African Americans, older African Americans. I'm not old, but I'm older, and as an older African American, I feel completely safe at the remote sites because of the safety measures that are taken in place. And I'm a captain. I mean, everybody pretty much stays not 6 feet away from each other, like 10 feet away from each other. Teachers who are coming in to work, they go straight to, there's plenty of PPE, masks, disinfectant, hand sanitizer. People go straight to their classrooms. One of the ways that where in schools where it was spread, where you had people who were congregating around the mailboxes or eating lunch together, none of that occurs. So we've learned what we have learned, we're taking forward, and it's given us the opportunity to apply it to what we are going to do once we're at a place where those students who we feel we have not been able to engage effectively in small groups are being brought back.
All right, well, I thank you so much. And we want to stick to our 10 minutes, but there are a few questions that did get put in the chat. Is that something that I could follow up with you or someone in your office and get answers?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you get those to me, email format, or we'll figure out a way and then we'll get responses.
Great.
And I want to thank you all for being here. I don't think there's any more important place for you to be tonight than where you are seated right now on this screen, and you're about to hear from a panel. So please, 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 thank you for being here, and also thank you for all you're doing. I know this is tough. I know it's hard. It's a pandemic that we're all going through together, and I just want to tell you, there is no group that I would rather go through this with than parents of San Francisco children, because my mom and dad were parents of a San Francisco child. So appreciate you all. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Matthews. We really appreciate your time and your support to help families understand the priorities and policies in SFUSD, as you always do. And next up, we're really excited to move to our panel discussion that's going to be facilitated by Tara Kini. Oh, hang on, I'm going to remove the spotlight from you, Dr. Matthews, so you're not in the spotlight anymore. Kate, if you want to share the slide, we have a picture of Tara Kini. She is a parent and a former teacher in the district, and she now works on education issues at the state and national level, and she serves as the Learning Policy Institute's Chief of Staff and Director of State Policy. So I'd like to pass it over to Tara now, and you can stop sharing. Actually, why don't you share the next slide? We'll let Tara introduce the panel. And I'm going to see if I can spotlight her. All right, here we go.
Great. Hopefully everybody can hear me, and thank you so much, Miranda and Parents for Public Schools, for putting on this really excellent event and conversation. And thank you, Dr. Matthews, for giving us all of those updates and overview on what we can expect coming out of the school district. As a society and as a community here in San Francisco, we're facing a tsunami of crises right now: a public health crisis, an economic crisis, a civil rights crisis, a climate change crisis that's sparking the wildfires and the smoke that's choking us all today. And these crises, I think, are stretching our families to the breaking point right now, with unemployment and the stresses of being confined at home and responsible for the care and education of their children, and dealing with COVID-related illnesses. And we know that all of this impacts students' learning. At its core, learning is social and emotional. We know that children learn when they feel safe and supported, and it's hard for children to learn when they're fearful or traumatized or overcome with emotion. So schools need to be providing the supportive environments for learning, where children can form strong relationships, where they're engaged, and where they feel that they belong. As educators and families, I think we know this. Research is also saying this more and more clearly, and you'd be surprised that it is unfortunately still somewhat breaking news for policymakers out there in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. We know students are struggling right now, but we also know that integrating social and emotional learning into the life of a school and fostering those supportive, caring relationships within the school community can help to counter the impacts of the pandemic on lifelong success and learning. We also can see that families are critical in this effort. They've always been essential partners, but this has become, I think, even more clear during distance learning, when parents are facilitating their kids' learning at home. And how we support families is critical to creating the conditions in which children can learn during distance learning. So we have so much expertise in our community here in San Francisco to lean on. I'm really delighted to introduce the rockstar panel that we have today, who are going to tell you how they're doing these things in their schools and how they're experiencing it. So let me introduce our panelists. We have Brigitte Chelcarrillo, who's a junior at Lowell High School. Dorothy Clark, who's a SFUSD parent and a paraeducator at John Muir. Helen Parker, the principal at Sherman Elementary. Michael Essien, principal at Martin Luther King Middle School. and Nick Chandler, Community School Coordinator at Buena Vista Horace Mann K-8. So I'm going to kick us off with a few questions for our panelists, but I want to encourage the audience to drop your questions into the chat box as we go, because we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And I just want to confirm that the Q&A coming in through the interpretation rooms are coming into the main line as well, because I didn't see multiple languages coming through in the chat and the Q&A in the last with Dr. Matthews. So I just want to confirm that that's working. I also want to invite, we have, I think, 85 people on this Zoom right now. So much expertise in our Zoom room. So invite you all to put your own answers to the questions into the chat so we can learn from everybody's expertise on this call. Don't be shy about that. So I'm gonna,
can I just add one thing? I just wanted to jump in because Brigitte, who's our student on the panel, you won't see her face, but she will be there to answer the questions. So I just wanted to let you know that she's here, but you might not see her on the screen.
Got it. Thank you, Miranda. So Brigitte, I'm going to ask you the first question. Tell us a little bit, if you can, about what your return to school as an 11th grader at Lowell has looked like. What have your teachers and the school as a whole been doing to help you build and maintain strong relationships with them and with your peers during distance learning? And if you can, tell us a little bit about what's happening during class to do that. And then is this happening outside of class as well, for example, in your extracurriculars? Brigitte?
Good afternoon, everyone. It has really looked really different for everyone, I'm pretty sure. Never expected for me to do online school ever. It has been really different, really new. Trying to understand all these new apps or new things that we are using to turn in schoolwork. Just it has been really hard to do schoolwork or do anything in general, just because you're learning new things and you are trying to figure out as school goes and how you could fit things into your schedule or not. We are having a lot of breakout rooms in schools, just trying to interact with everyone as much as possible. My teachers are like trying to do like little games or something to encourage us to talk to other people while in class and trying to understand everything we are doing and trying to help each other as teamwork. I know my teachers have been chatting with us at the beginning of class, like if everything's going good, are we like catched up on work? Are we understanding the work? And I also have an after school program, which they're helping me and like asking if I need help in schoolwork, if I need help understanding schoolwork or not. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. It sounds like it has been really hard, but it also sounds like there's at least some pieces where your teachers and your after school program are able to provide some supports and are trying to make an effort to build relationships, at least at the beginning of class and things like that. I'm going to ask Dorothy. Hi, Dorothy. A similar question. So you play a dual role, both as the parent of a first grader, I understand, and as a paraeducator at John Muir. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what your return to school has looked like. What strategies are you using in your paraeducator role to build strong relationships with your students during distance learning? And on the other side of the table, what are you experiencing as a parent of a first grader? How have your teachers and the other school staff worked to build a strong relationship with you and your child during these first 6 weeks of the school year? think we might have a little bit of an audio problem.
And Dorothy, you could try turning your video off if it's a
So-
connectivity problem.
Uh,
Maybe we could give her a
Can
minute.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe turn your video off and it will maybe help with the
Yeah.
bandwidth.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a para at Argonne, and
Oh,
yeah, and
sorry.
it's okay. I usually start my classes maybe 10 minutes early so I can talk to the kids and get to know them as they come in before we start the actual work. And that helps a little with the getting to know each other. With my daughter's teacher, I speak to her maybe twice a week about her schoolwork and what she needs improvement on. We can work with them at home. So that helps a lot. I hope I answered your question.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Dorothy. It sounds like you've got some really effective strategies in place, and you're hearing from your child's teacher twice a week. Wow, that's a lot. So that's great to hear. I'm gonna turn it to Helen next. Helen, people have talked about prioritizing a restorative approach to reopening schools. This can mean building safe, inclusive schools where teachers build on the cultures and experiences of their students and the ways that they teach, and using a restorative approach to addressing challenging student behaviors. Can you share a little bit about how Sherman Elementary's approach to reopening schools has been going, and how you've been fostering strong relationships in that distance learning setting, and how you've been helping students to build social and emotional skills? And if you can, share what you've been doing to support your staff to get ready to do that.
Thank you so much, Tara. I'm Helen Parker, the principal at Sherman. Thank you for having me here this evening. I think just before we move into what we've been doing, it's important that I just clarify what restorative practices is a little bit.
Helen, we lost your audio, I think. I don't know if others did.
No?
Oh,
Is
we
it
can,
good?
we can hear, yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just wanted to clarify a little bit what restorative practices is, because it's a term that gets used a lot and people sometimes are not quite sure. So it's intentionally building relationship so that when harm occurs, there is something to restore, that we can fix it. And inevitably in a school, there will be harm at some time. It's about doing with, not to or for, just like Superintendent Matthews spoke to earlier. And it's about understanding that everybody has needs, and a school is like a little ecosystem of needs. And certainly we were all going along just fine until Friday the 13th of March, when we were sent home. And then that was like a big hit to our system, our little system, and the needs changed and harm was caused by that. And we really tried to prioritize the connection, both electronic connection in terms of getting computers out to kids immediately on that first Friday, pulling our computer carts apart so that we could try and stay connected with them, and also thinking about what their social emotional needs would be. So every teacher went home with stamped envelopes ready to write letters to the kids during distance learning. And then beyond that, stepping back to think about the needs of everybody, of the parents, the staff, and of course the students, and reconfiguring how we worked so that we could prioritize those things. So making sure that our coaches were really addressing teacher needs. And those were the fact that teachers were kind of in shock and grief that they'd been pulled away from their students, but also their technology needs in terms of learning how to do Zoom and how to do Google Classrooms. So there was those two things. Thinking about what our parents needed, I would have maybe some anxious calls or emails from parents, and then would dig a bit deeper and find out like a mom is now trying to be the perfect teacher as well as the perfect parent, and is weeping in the shower every night because they're feeling so overwhelmed by this huge task that they now have, feeling super responsible for their child's learning as well as all their other needs. So it's kind of having an empathic stance around that as well. And then really using our partnerships and relationships to prioritize the social emotional piece. So our after school program and our social worker work together very well to develop their own wellness checks, and then have like social groups for our students. For me, in terms of supporting teachers, I knew that that was the critical relationship, the teacher-student relationship, and empowering our students to do whatever, our teachers, sorry, to do whatever they thought was best in building that relationship. So I had one teacher, she went and drew in chalk outside of the house of each and every student in her class. Another teacher who was like, her cat became the big star of the classroom, and the kids were loving the fact that now they had a class cat. Just each teacher came up with something on their own to really hook the kids and try and keep them engaged as we worked through to the end of the semester. And then in the beginning of this semester, really prioritizing the building of relationships and doing kind of an orientation where teachers only did a little Zoom time for the first week, but then called every family, met with every kid to establish that authentic partnership in order to move into the learning. So as we think about coming back to schools, the same priorities persist. It's like, what are the needs? What resources do we have? How are we going to meet those needs?
Helen, thanks for that overview. You guys had such a rich array of strategies, it sounds like, that you pursued, and you really let teachers personalize that in the ways that they were reaching out to students and families. I also really appreciate you naming at the front that it's really hard to build relationships if we don't have the connectivity, and how important that was at the beginning. And I think the district has tried to prioritize that, but also that you did it through snail mail and stamped posted envelopes as well. Michael, turning to you next. As principal at MLK Middle School, I'd like to ask you to take a step back and give us your perspective on how your school assessed student and family needs last spring and responded, and not just academic needs, but also social and emotional needs, and then how you've been able to build on those strategies this fall. And can you see them making a difference for students and families?
Forgive my interruption before you answer the question. If the Spanish interpreter could please take a look at the chat from Taylor. We're having a hard time getting someone connected. Apologies to the panel.
Tara, thank you for the question. So just a little backdrop. So MLK has been a community school. This is going into our 6th year. And as a community school, we reach out to families in different ways, and this has been ongoing. So one of the things that we do is we do a needs assessment, and this is something that's been ongoing at our school site. And so the connections that we have, the partnerships with our families have been developed over the last 5 to 6 years. So when COVID-19 hit, being able to call our parents was not something that was either new to the teachers, the staff members at MLK, nor was it new to the family members with us reaching out. And so it wasn't anything different. What we ended up doing is being able to ask parents what their needs were based upon the new conditions, because things had shifted and things had changed. And it's one thing for us as a site to say, well, we have these resources for you, but if those resources aren't aligned to what the students and the families need, it becomes problematic. And so we were able to engage in what we call connecting with families, where we found out not only the needs that they might have in terms of laptops and access to Wi-Fi, but living conditions, if they needed food, if they were in jeopardy of if they were housing insecure, possibly losing where they were staying. And then we were able to collect all of this information and then respond to the needs. So as a community school, we partnered with over 50 different agencies that were providing services for the various needs of the students and families that were at MLK. And so one of the challenges we had as a school site in maintaining the connection with families is discovering a method and a way to make sure that those agencies could still have access to families. Because one of the things that we do know, we could control physically being in the space, who was having access to our children and making sure that security and safety protocols were not violated. And going to COVID-19 and sheltered in place, then it became extremely important to figure out ways to have oversight over that. We needed to be able to see what an agency might be saying and doing with a particular kid outside of our purview. And so we worked to try to figure out ways to create protocols for safety and security. And I can honestly say that we're still trying to figure that piece out. We tend to be along with the agency whenever they're providing particular services to students and families. But the other thing is, when we did assess the needs, we needed to be able to respond to some of those needs. So some of the things that we did fundraising. We did a GoFundMe to add additional support. You know, the district provided laptops, laptop distributions to families and Wi-Fi distributions, and they continued to provide food to families, which was something that was crucial in maintaining this connection with our families. In particular, schools that are Title I schools, where this is more significant because food and access to connectivity and laptops is an equity issue. Well, we raised additional monies, $10,000 in addition, and then provided gift cards to the families that were identified as needing additional food supports. So this is what we did as far as maintaining the connection with families. And we established a way for the families to still stay in contact with us even when school ended. Because the thing that is really important around being a community school is school happens in a certain span of time, but when school shuts down for the summer, the needs for our students and families don't shut down. And so it continues. And so the partnership that we have with Deacon, they're part of what we do during the regular day. And so then they took over as the continued support. And so families were still able to reach out to individual teachers who could then relay information to myself, my assistant principal, and or the Beacon director and his staff, so that we can continue to deliver the services based upon their needs. So that's what we did as far as making the connection with families. But when it came to dealing with delivering instruction in the springtime and what we're doing in the fall, that was a heavier lift. And the heavier lift was around the one thing that we did not take into consideration, it was an assumption on our part, is we did not realize how big a resource proximity was for learning. We often talk about social distance, social learning, and we're social animals, but literally seeing that when kids were not present, what was lost and where we felt this the strongest is in our children who are the most marginalized, kids that had IEPs, kids that have SSTs, student success team forms, kids that are part of the 504 process that might have something that is interrupting a life activity. The fact that they were not in close proximity to us made it extremely difficult for us to deliver the services that they needed. And so we are still wrestling with how to address that in distance learning. But I do believe that there's some ideas that are coming up in terms of paper, pencil, and then also finding spaces where we can have individuals come in to provide particular support. But that's still also a struggle. The other piece that was really big is, like, we often talk about students when the academic learning. My teachers really struggled. We often talk about students needing that connectivity, but the teachers did as well. And teachers having skills to respond to particular behaviors and to respond to particular requests of students, it became a little more challenging when now we just have a laptop and potentially a breakout room. Teachers struggled with efficacy, being able to feel like they can have a real difference in what they're doing with children inside synchronous learning. And so we were thinking we had to develop ways to support teachers. And so one of the things that we ended up doing is providing surveys. We needed to ask students, we needed to ask family members and teachers what their needs were and what they were experiencing within distance learning. And then we had to respond to it. And I will just say one of the things that We did do that something very specific. Students felt that they missed their friends, and in their synchronous classrooms, the teachers were not allowing them to talk because the teachers felt like they needed to control all of the time because kids weren't going to learn. And so this was the constant feedback we were getting from students. And then we had to talk to teachers that, no, you need to release kids in breakout rooms to hold conversation. And then thinking about, well, then what supports will we need for teachers to build their capacity to construct the learning environment and ask questions that will allow students to actively engage and learn inside those distance learning classrooms, the breakout rooms. And so what we end up concluding is that there are so many things that we need to do, but we're still learning within this distance learning. But the one thing we prioritize is building the relationships with students, the families, and the teachers, that has to be the priority.
Michael, thank you so much. You covered a lot of ground, and I just want to draw out one of the many helpful, I think, practices that you shared is and challenges that you're running into is how do you really support those students with IEPs and on 504 plans? And I see that coming up in our chat line as well. So I want to encourage all of our panelists to chime in on that topic in particular, because it's of interest to our audience as well. And Nick, I'm going to turn to you next to share a bit, and maybe you can think about that in your remarks as well. But you're at Buena Vista Horace Mann, another community school within the school district. What approach is BVHM? And to put my cards on the table, I'm a parent there, so it's a place close to my heart. What are you taking to build relationships with families, and how do you see your approaches making a difference for students and families at your school?
Thanks, Tara. My name is Nick Chandler. I'm the community school coordinator at Buena Vista Horace Mann. And I want to echo something Principal Essien said. We fell back on our systems and our relationships as a community school when this crisis hit. We didn't build them. Food insecurity is not new to our community and the mission and the Latinx community. Housing insecurity is not new. The needs of students with IEPs are not new. What happened is we immediately had to pivot to a student-centered focus to a family-centered focus because the students weren't there anymore, right? We don't have those kids in front of us. So we rely on that relationship with those families. And so we knew that we had them. We knew they were strong in March. So there was a very intentional focus on maintaining them. Who has a connection with this family? How can we preserve it? And how can we make sure that we have two-way communication when something goes wrong? Because what we saw is family conditions changed very quickly. The family that was stable 1 week was in crisis the next week. So we needed very rapid response to needs. And so we leaned on those relationships. And I say we, not just as teachers. Teachers are the front of the spear, they're the tip of the spear for those relationships. But I say we as our teachers, we invested in a very robust wellness staff at the school to make sure we have counselors and social workers ready to respond to that need. We are tight partners with our beacon at Jamestown and have been for a long time. And they are an organization that has deep ties in the communities. So every decision we've made over the last few years has had that relationship front and center. So we leaned on that. One of the ways that we took advantage of that was that before we exited for the summer, we made sure, similar to MLK and the work that Leslie and Gibran and Essien did over there, was we made sure we had those transitions before that summer started. Here's this family, we know where they're at, they need support, they're asking for it. Who's the point person right now? You're gonna hold this for a while. You're gonna hold this through the summer, and when you come back, we're gonna be here to be back in collaboration and rethink how it works. So I wanna stress that partnership and that communication from parents to organizations, but also to each other. And just shouting out our ELAC, who is in the house right now. I see you all. Thank you for being here. That's the unsung heroes, right? Those are the folks that are watching us and calling us out and saying, hey, what about the kids with IEPs? How are you supporting them? How can we help you support them? So that open partnership, that investment in personnel to build those relationships, in philosophy, in professional development, in centering that in everything you do. You tell your teachers it's about relationships for years, and then it all of a sudden is very clearly about relationships. It's not a hard transition. So our teachers did an amazing job. The teachers completed all of the wellness checks in the spring. They just completed all of the wellness checks in the fall. And we are again falling back on those partnerships with the community organizations to try to respond to those needs. I think the benefit that we're seeing is, it's hard to say benefit. It's a benefit, but it's not adequate. We're responding to the needs with the resources that are there. What we're finding is there's not enough there. We have more hungry families than we have food for. We have more housing insecure families than we have support for. And so now that relationship and that work switches gears, and we turn into advocacy. We're being, the Latinx population in San Francisco is disproportionately impacted by this crisis. And we are scrambling to respond to it, but we're doing it together. The teachers are a piece of it. The parents are a piece of it. Our community organizations are a piece of it. So we lean on that structure to respond. And so far we're seeing movement in that we were able to conduct our wellness checks. We have a quantifiable needs assessment for all of our families at this point in time that we can use to decide how we're going to get those resources. And it's going to be interesting because it's dire right now for a lot of those families. So we're going to need to push hard. But again, we're doing it together.
Yeah, Nick, thank you for naming the resource issue. And I think we are all looking to the US Congress to come up with a fourth aid package, right? Our state of California needs it, and all of the other states across the country as well. I know there's some opportunities in California right now to raise resources, but we need our federal government stepping in as well, I think. Thank you for calling out the amazing partnership, both from community-based organizations, and the handoff you described over the summer is really beautiful, and I think a really impressive example of the hard work it takes to be able to support those transitions and make sure students and families are taken care of during that time.
Can I name one more strategy? Sorry, just one more strategy that I think was really critical. When we moved from the spring to the fall, we kept our class cohorts intact. We kept the same kids and families moving together, and we asked the previous teachers to identify how they contact that family. We had them meet with the teacher receiving them, and the method that we're communicating is really important. Text, phone, WhatsApp, email, snail mail, everyone had a different entry point, and we made sure that entry point transferred when we moved over to the next year. So that's just a strategy I want to name that was very successful for us.
Super important strategy. I want to turn back to Brigitte and Dorothy to help us. I think we have just a few more minutes. I also want to encourage folks to throw their questions into the chat so we can respond to your questions, not just mine. So Brigitte, my question for you, I just want to acknowledge the really hard time this is for you and your classmates. I wanted to see if you have any advice for our superintendent and our district leaders and your school leaders that you want to share about how they can better support you and your peers right now.
I know they're doing their best, but I like how they check in with wellness, or wellness people checking in on the families or the students. I check in with wellness because I know some people and I've gotten really close to those people, and I'm pretty sure almost all more students want to and have connections and to be able to help each other. Wellness has been really helpful for me. That's all I have.
That's great. Props to our wellness staff for the supports they're providing and the connections that they're facilitating with students. I think that's a great piece of advice. And Dorothy, I'm going to turn to you with the same question. You know, wearing both your parent hat and your paraeducator hat, do you have advice that you want to share with our school district leaders and with the school leaders about the ways that they can better support you as a paraeducator and as a parent?
As a parent, I get a ton of support from my daughter's school, Chandler, and as a para, I think I get pretty adequate support as Can you hear me though?
I don't know if that's my audio or, okay. We're just having a few audio issues on your mic, Dorothy. So I'm gonna move on that. Apologies. And I know we're almost coming to the end of our time. So Miranda, cut me off if I need to, or can I ask a couple more questions?
We are pretty much at the end of our time, and I hate to break into our breakout group time. If you have a burning question that you want to ask, I would say one more, but then we probably need to end so we can move to breakout rooms.
I think we should get into breakout rooms so that everybody on this call can share their expertise with each other and their experiences with each other. So let's give a virtual round of applause to our amazing panelists. You can do it through your reactions button. Thank you all. And I'm just so impressed with the resourcefulness of our students and educators across the district and families in coming together during this time.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll echo those thank yous to our panelists and to our moderator and to Dr. Matthews, and not just my thank yous for you all being here tonight, but thank you for the work that you've done for our children and our families. We are going to go to breakout rooms in a minute. It's an opportunity, as you know, for you to share with each other. We really hope you're going to stick around with this for it. We especially hope you're going to stick around because when we come back to the large group, we're going to have